August, the last day of August. Wow. It's noon, so this is Coffee with Ralph, and I'm Ralph Gill, your host. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about Medicare. It's getting that time of the year where it's Medicare season, they call it. I'm not sure exactly why they do that, but case in point, there's so many commercials out there that just, for lack of a better way, want to insult your intelligence. Like 65 years old, all of a sudden you've forgotten everything you needed to know about the basics of life. And we're going to have to treat you like imbeciles. Well, I'm 65 and I'm here to tell you I don't like that idea a bit. So I thought what I'd do over the next few weeks is I'd tackle this thing about Medicare from a guy just turned 65. I mean, I've done this for 20 some years now, but I also need to remind you of something. Coffeewithralph.com is a free 15-minute phone call with me. I'll answer the questions. Look, 65 years as an older advisor, I guess that's what they call me now. I'm a tour advisor. Wow, I love those terms. Don't know about you, but here we go. I don't have anything to hold back or withhold or not tell you the truth or sugarcoat it. I'm just going to tell you the way it is. So let me get into this a bit. And I'm going to zip over and I'm going to share the screen. This is actually right off Medicare.gov. First thing they want us to believe here is that Medicare Part A is free. Near as I can figure, I've worked 50 some years and I've paid into Part A Medicare for 50 some years. So I guess it's good to know that now I don't have to pay anymore. But if you've worked at least 10 years, which is 40 quarters, then you're entitled to Part A. It's just that simple. If you're not, then there's a fee that you have to pay, a premium that you have to pay just for Part A. Well, what does Part A really do? Part A is a hospital. I don't make it any simpler than it's room and board at a hospital. It'll pay for rehab at the hospital. It will pay for nursing home. It will pay for how do I want to say that? Tests, medical. It's covered under Part B. So Part A really boils down to we're going to cover the hospital for you. Some room and board, nursing, maybe the surgical suite, not the doctors, not the nurses, not any of that. Room and board. It's really that simple. And each time you go in, let's talk about this benefit period here. I'm going to highlight that so you can see what they say about it. So every time you go in the hospital for a different occurrence within a 90-day period, you're in a benefit period. So I go in January 2, right? I have a heart attack and I go in. That's considered the beginning of the benefit period. So now they send me home. I go through my rehabilitation. And then for 60 days following that, I don't get any more care. That means I'm out of that benefit period. So if in day 61, I have another heart attack, I start another benefit period. Well, let's play the devil's advocate here. What happens if I'm in that benefit period, I have a heart attack, and then I break my hip? You have another benefit period that starts because of your hip. So you can have as many benefit periods as you can think of in a 1-year period. And each time you do, the way Medicare is set up is you have a $1,600 deductible coming up in 2024 for the first 60 days. So if you spend 60 days in the hospital for one problem, one occurrence, then you pay $1,600. Now, without going into detail, your Medicare Advantage and your Medicare Supplement programs, which you see both commercials for right now, handle that differently. I'll get into Medicare Advantage probably week 2, possibly 3. How we do that? We'll see how far we get today in our 15 minutes. But I need you to remember, if you wonder if it's covered, you can always go online and check it. But I'll tell you, point blank and straight up here, that most people, while they were working, never really questioned what their hospitalization insurance covered through work. They found out when they went in. So now here we are, 65, and we're supposed to all of a sudden need to know, want to know, must know everything there is to know about Medicare. Well, folks, the last time I had checked, there was over 10,000 different medical codes in the code book that Medicare looked at. There's no way anyone, I don't care who they are, can tell you if something's covered without checking the code book. So for us to sit here and want to know every in and out of Part A hospital insurance, that's silly. Let's look at the bulk of them. Let's look at the major thing, which is the being admitted, there we go, into the hospital. That's what we need to know. So while we have the time, let me zip down here and talk about Part B. Now you see it, $164.90. That's Part B premium. Each one of us get to pay that, or higher, depending on your income. There's a chart down here for that. And what that does, Part B covers the medical issue. So what is medical? Well, it's anything that's not the hospital. It's the doctor, it's the rehab, it's the medical testing, it's the x-rays, it's even drugs that they administer in their office through IVs. All that stuff's covered under Part B. Now, the thing to think about there is, if you go to your doctor, how's he going to get paid from Medicare? And again, when we get into this Medicare Advantage program, which we will, because it's that time, we'll have to talk about generalities. We can't talk about specifics because each plan covers things a little different. And then when it comes to the Medicare supplements, they're standardized. So it's easy enough to understand how they work. If you don't sign up for Part B when you're 65 or first eligible, you might be a penalty involved when you do. But if you have insurance through your work and you haven't retired, then it depends on your insurance at work. Do they require you to sign up for Part B? Or are they going to stay as primary? Which we need to understand the difference between primary and secondary insurance when we start talking about Medicare Advantage and the Medicare supplement programs. Medicare takes a different place with the Medicare Advantage. They are no longer primary, they are secondary. With the Medicare supplement, they are primary, meaning that the supplement will pay what they don't, or most of it. If you don't sign up right on time, you've got a 10% penalty for every year you don't sign up. So if you wait 2 years, you're going to pay 20% more than the premium. It's added monthly. I mean, you can see that there. It's not a one-time late fee. It's every month for the rest of your life. So if you question at all whether you should be on Part B, if you're still working, then call me, call your HR department. Let's work it out, because it could be a huge penalty. The only one higher than that is the Part D penalty. If you don't sign up for that when you're first, then it's 1% a month for as long as you don't sign up, based on the average, national average of that premium. So Part B is going to cover doctor, medical, that type of thing. The big gaps in these, if I scroll back up here, Part A does cover the rehabilitation in a facility. Nowadays, however, you're not recovering in a nursing home any longer, unless it's something really severe like a stroke. And they cover up to 100 days of care in a facility if it's for rehabilitation. Remember those words, rehabilitation. If there's a reasonable expectation that you're going to be improved and you will be able to be released on your own, then that's considered rehabilitation. Anything other than that is considered long-term care. And I'm going to jump into that subject just a bit in here because that's the biggest misconception about Medicare. Medicare will not pay for custodial care. Medicare will pay if there is a treatment plan for recovery at home, but that has to be submitted by your doctor and the rehabilitation folks. And then they will then decide whether that's what they're going to do or not do. And it's up to them whether they pay for it. Now, long-term care is something different. You know, I'm 65. I just told you that. And it's interesting because I watch all these commercials and they all talk about how we're all active or riding bikes or climbing mountains or doing swim aerobics or, hey, for the bulk of us, we're still working. For a portion of us, we're not going to retire anytime in the near future. So when does Medicare have to kick in? And what do I need to be prepared for? Well, there's a lot there. But I want to jump, like I said, I want to jump over into this thing called long-term care. And I want to talk to you about a client that I just lost. He passed away on the 14th. And I got the call from his niece. He was a single man. And when we sat down, we were very specific about who was going to do what for him, how they were going to help him, who was going to help him, how was he going to pay him. All those things were taken care of. I mean, it was right down to when I die, this is what I want. We had it all written out. And I got the call from his niece, who happens to be was his power of attorney for the financial stuff. And I was blessed to be a part of that. She said, so you were the man that helped Ken set all this stuff up? I said, yep. We worked very hard on it about 20 years ago, and we kept updating it until a couple years ago. Well, actually, COVID hit, and we couldn't meet any longer. And I kept touch with him on the phone, and I knew that he was, getting older and frailer. And his niece and nephew, and his wife, so it'd be his niece-in-law, stepped in to take care of him, as he had anticipated, and he paid them accordingly, just as we had planned. But she said, so how did you know? How did I know what? How did you know that he was going to need care? How did you know that? You don't have a crystal ball. I said, no, I don't have a crystal ball. I said, but statistically, I can tell you that I don't have a single client that's passed, that hasn't gone through some form of care at one point or another. And so that's just something I make sure we talk about and we plan for as much as we possibly can. She said, well, that was a blessing because there was never a quarrel about who was going to do what. Nobody ever questioned, the nephew getting paid what he was getting paid. There was never any of that. And now that he's gone, we have all the documents here in place that says that so-and-so is the beneficiary in this and so-and-so is beneficiary. So it's all spelled out. And there's going to be no fighting. It's just going to go about finishing up, selling his collection of antique sailboat models, and doing different things like that, and then splitting the money accordingly. But I thought it was quite nice of her to say she appreciated all the work we had done. That's the one part of my business that, frankly, we don't see enough of. And it's not that we're in it for the thanks, but it's nice to know somebody noticed it. Well, back to Medicare. Medicare doesn't pay for any of that. Not a bit of his care was paid for by Medicare because it's not medically necessary care. It was custodial care. It wasn't for rehabilitation. It was to make sure that he didn't fall and get hurt and stay there and pass away because nobody knew he fell. It was to make sure the house was kept up. It was to make sure the roof was shoveled off in the winter. It was the driveway and the car maintenance and all these other things that Ken couldn't do any longer. They did for him. That was long-term care. And towards the end, of course, hospice stepped in and took care of the final days, which was a blessing as well. So Medicare isn't as confusing as what they want you to believe it is. It is as straightforward as you possibly can make a plan, I guess. Part A covers hospital, room and board, some nursing, rehabilitation in a nursing home. It covers chemotherapy and things of that nature as well, as long as it's done in the hospital. Chemotherapy done outside the hospital is covered under Part B. Weird, okay? So Part A is basically a hospital. If it has to do with the hospital, then they're going to pay it. Part B, like I said, is the medical. There you go. Doctors, medical tests, x-rays, all that stuff is covered under Part B. You will pay a higher premium if you have a higher income in retirement. That's part of our job too as advisors, is make sure that we maximize your taxing situation so that you get as much out without paying a higher premium on Part B if we can do it. Yes, there's a deductible. It's $226. Again, Medicare Supplement, Medicare Advantage, both cover those differently. Listen, coffeewithralph.com is a free 15-minute phone call. I've done the best I can in the 15 minutes that we've got here. I didn't talk about Part D. That's something totally different. It's drugs. It's put D stands for drugs. And then there's Part C, which I can't talk about in depth here. So this is Medicare.gov. This is how they spell it out so you understand what it is that they're going to cover and what it is. So if you go to Medicare Advantage, that they will cover, and what will the Medicare Advantage plan cover? Or if you stay with original Medicare, how do you get optional insurance out there called the Medicare Supplement to cover what they don't? Next week, we'll talk about that. But for today, I think that pretty well does my time. If you have questions, please feel free to call me or go to coffeewithralph.com. Schedule that 15-minute call, free of charge. So I want to make sure everybody's got that. I want you to have a great day, and I will see you next Thursday on